particular domain of disaster studies. So what I would do today is I would like to share some experience from one of our ongoing research projects from the Indian Sundarbans. This is not Bengal or Northeast, but this is from the Delta, from the Lower Basin and Sundarbans Delta area, Delta of West Bengal, from Bengal, Delta, spanning India and Bangladesh. But this particular project mainly focuses on the Indian part of the Sundarbans, and I will come to it little later. But I think I would like to give some examples because I have also been enriched a lot from the presentations which were taken, the presentation that I heard today morning. And so to start with, this is a fodder vessel, and it has a story. And I would like to kind of convey the story because I know this is like the end of the day, and all of us are quite tired. So it is better to see some photographs and share some stories rather than hardcore methodological theoretical research. But I'm sure that theories and methods and paradigms will build on from there. So this fodder vessel, I really could think about this fodder vessel, and then I saw this fodder vessel. I am seeing this fodder vessel so many times. Every time I go there, and when I say there, it is Kuminmani, one of the island villages of Sundarbans, located in the Gour block, which is in the southeastern part of the Sundarbans, a very remote village. And Gour is very famous for its tiger attacks and floods, erosions, cyclones. So Gour is a kind of a riskscape which keep encountering multiple disruptive risks. So, coming to this story of the fodder vessel, so this was our first encounter with the island village of Kuminmani, and this was also an accidental exploration because this was the time, this was like January 2021, when we were supposed to conduct some ethnographic surveys in some villages, some of the blocks of Sundarbans, both northeast and both southeast and southwest. And this is the first time. So the first time in January 2021, we had a board, some research scholars, and 3 faculty members. We were just hopping from one island to another. And then we landed in Kuminmani. And we started talking to the people. And the people embraced us, and we kept on talking for long hours. So, and this was neither focused discussion nor something very formal as part of the ethnographic exercise. But this was an informal, in Bengali, we use the term Malda. So, and for long hours actually. And then the women were sharing their stories with us. And, now I will give a pause, but I will take you to another experience. I am extremely hungry, very simply. All the qualities that an hungry disciplinary researcher needs, I think, and again, very famously famous for that. So now taking 2022 and 2022 March and in Sion. So Sion is in Switzerland, and Sion that's the region where the upper stream, the upper course of the Rhone River, it's located. So the Rhone, the upper stretch starts from there in Sion, and we were in a canton. So canton is like a county in Switzerland, and there were countless that time we were having a project where we were comparing the 2 river basins, Rhone and Ganga. So we were having interviews with some people, some community representatives, and some households from the county, from Sion. And there were also people who were officers, the canton officers, and they were speaking in French. So I had a colleague who knows French quite well, but then I don't know or I don't understand French. I was trying to concentrate still, but not understanding what was really going on. But suddenly there was a, the heart of laughter. people were laughing. There was a round of laughter in that room. And then I was very curious, asked them, like, please translate. And then they said, like, it was so they pointed out one gentleman, and who, was very witty and pointed out that how 5 years back there was a disaster. Disaster means there were floods. So the road, there was a rise in the water level, and there were already warnings and apprehensions beforehand. So the households, the people are asked to relocate before, I think the warnings are generally 3 weeks before. So this man, he kept his car, used car, so in the garage, because he wanted it to get destroyed with the flood. Because then he would be able to claim insurance from the government. So everyone was very happy and they were laughing, and there was sort of laughter around that. So then, in my field time, I came back and when I reported about the day, I said that, it was very painful for me at that moment. And I was not there in that moment anymore. I actually went back to the French Commission first visit in this island village of Dhupguri. Read from here. This is actually the remark, this is the English translation of the remark that Jalpaiguri, one of the women from her early 40s, who met in Dhupguri. So she was narrating her stories like many other people also. And this is her story where she was talking about Ayla. She was describing Ayla and what happened. And it was giving a vivid picture and showing that all these things that you see here that underwater for so many days. Nobody could reach Myanmar because it is such a remote island, like other island villages of Algeria, Chotomola, and Dhupguri. You go to that part of the shore, for example. And then she said, when this storm, cyclone actually, there was an outbreak of the cyclone and there was rushing waters, and so we really lost our land, our everything. And then she talked about a fodder vessel. So how she was actually trying to, she was running after a fodder vessel, trying to get hold of it. And she told us that she even risked her life. So her family members were asking her not to go there. Don't go, because there's danger. So even we carried away by the water. But then she didn't listen to it. So then we asked, why did you do so? So then she told that this is so precious because I have inherited it from my mother-in-law, and my mother-in-law inherited it from her mother-in-law. So it has history. So how could I have let the fodder vessel carried away by the water? So you see the way we relate to artifacts, objects, and unfortunately we try to understand them as artifacts and objects. But these are artifacts, and with these stories, with these layers, they become augmented artifacts. So why I'm talking about this? Because we are trying to put up an exhibition called Sensing the Sundarbans, and I will talk a little bit about this, which is an outcome from this aquamix project. And we'll have a panel. We'll have actually not a panel, but we'll have a space where there will be one section on augmented artifacts. Now, another artifact. This is a landing. I think in the morning I also heard about loss and damage and memory and their implications, long-term implications. So this is a landing. The land is not there anymore. So the land is not there. The land is submerged, but the land really is there. And the household, the elderly person of the household, he has preserved the landing for so many years. And they have known that. I think Kasar was talking about poetry. And poetry is a big issue in these river islands, not only in Sundarban but also in IQAC, Malda, and Mushidabad, and all the chores, especially Kalia Chowk and those areas which are very vulnerable to land bank erosion and what role Karakta has played in this. So this, and unfortunately for the first time when we went to the Kalia Chowk block office, the land was mentioned as oil. So they were not even ready to recognize it as Shikosi, because that will then create a lot of bureaucratic hazards. So anyway, and yes, so, but this is again, so I told you that you will not find any structure, any timeline, any space, nothing is disrupting everything. So again, like this is from our field work conducted in some of the churches in Malda, and this is from the Hamidpur church. And again, in the prologue, there is a story. And so again, this is the first time when I went to Hamidpur, 2011. And I was sitting there talking to the people, and they were talking about like, so this was a chore, and they were trying to tell me about all kind of things. They were trying to enlighten me about like land submergence and emerges in that particular stretch of the. So they told that in 1970s, early 1970s, Panchalangagur area, yes, bunch of Panchalangagur. Then there was a massive 1971 flood. Then parts of Panchalangagur went under water. And then there was a patch of land which emerged. So you are saying like this, there was a patch of land which emerged there. And the entire Hamidpur village of the Panchalangagur area, it was submerged. And then there was another piece of, and then there was a land which emerged, and they settled there. So that was the Hamidpur village, and then Hamidpur village again got submerged, and then 5 kilometers on the left, there was another patch of land, and the Hamidpur village was there. And then now this is also the Hamidpur village where I was talking to them. So I was completely confused about going on. Because every time they were talking about Hamidpur, and I could understand that they were actually talking about different parcels of land. Then, and I was not able to ask directly. So because that's was the first time I visited that area. But then after some time, after I think 1.5 to 2 hours, then they came into the puzzle when a young fellow, he actually understood that I was not understanding anything. And then he told me that, see, they are Hamidpur villagers. Hamidpur villagers are living there, but not the piece of. So wherever they go, they carry the name with them. So then I understood that this is not a like geographical space, but it is a cultural contribution. It is something that they carry them in their mind, in their memory. So the loss is there, and the absence is there, but at the same time the presence is there. Stronger than before. So these are the dynamics which is very difficult for I think non-islanders to understand. So then yes. So now coming to again it's not very structured, but I think I would be a little bit focusing on or highlighting on 2 key themes. One is disaster, water-related disaster, more specifically floods. Extreme events, droughts and floods, but again, as I'm speaking or as I'm focusing on Sundarban, floods and cyclones, these are the extreme events. And they are also, later there are questions around this. I can also demonstrate because I think there is also a discussion in the morning where somebody said that floods, they are not technical phenomena. They are also social, ecological phenomena in that sense. So anyway, 2 keywords in this lecture for the talk are disaster and museum. Disaster and museum making, if I may say. Now, before focusing on water and water-related disasters and museum making, so you can understand the name now, Aqua Muse. It's a very nice name, very provocative name, and there's a wide spectrum of everything in that. And many concepts, you can, dismantle concepts, you can play with boundaries, guard them, whatever you feel. But I thought I was focusing on disaster and museum. In India and all over the world, of course, we now have some museums which are dedicated to disasters. So, for example, this is one of the very important museums which came up. And this is a collective initiative of a non-profit, voluntary organization. And 2012 and 2014, this Remember Bhopal Museum came up. And one of the partners from IQAC, Dhupguri, she is a sociologist. Shalini Sharma. She is also one of the very important stakeholders who played a very important role in putting up this museum together with activists and mainly with people who faced the brunt of the burden, who faced the crisis. All of us know how disastrous the Bhopal gas tragedy is. But even much more disastrous is the way or the mechanisms, and I'm getting recorded, but that's fine, are the mechanisms through which the government has tried to suppress, the reality and the fault lines of that disaster. So this is a movement. Beyond the museum, this is a movement through which, the people have come together, the victims have come together, the victims have been supported by the, academicians, by activists, by artivists, people who, do their activism, pursue their activism using art. So all of them have come together to really try to dig deeper, dig further, the different, how do I say, the different realities that constitute this gas tragedy, but they have not been discussed so well. So, but again, this museum faces some financial insecurity. But so I'll not go into the details of the museum, but you can find out more details about the history of the museum. And if you go to Bhopal, definitely you can go there and see what they're trying to do, what they're up to. Similarly, this is from another museum from East Japan, Tohoku, and where there is this triple disaster took place. Because Japan disaster is very common, but 2011, the March, so you say about 3.11, that particular disaster, which is a triple disaster, because after the tsunami and due to this radioactive materials from the Fukushima nuclear reactor plant came out. And it had a very catastrophic impact on air and water in the nearby localities, or the locale. So this museum and many other museums as well, today we have them which try to make people aware, and also try to make people aware about the disaster risk reduction strategies, and somehow they also accommodate community perspectives and perceptions of understanding disaster. So to a great extent, I think there is this off and for community approach embedded in this kind of museum making initiative. But so this is another example of Moriya Museum from Japan, and you can see that how artists they are coming to the forefront, and really they are trying to use citizen science and again make people extremely aware, and some of these are also participatory projects. Now I come to our project, Aquamuse, and here we are a group of researchers where we try to actually, and actually not only a group of not only researchers, but a group of a collective maybe, where all the people from different sectors are here. Because I told you off and for community, but this is an initiative where the by can be highlighted even further. So this is an approach where the community themselves play a very important role, because I come to those questions now. And this project is about 3 river basins and deltas. So one is the Nile and the Volga and the Congo. And so the key ideas are now if you focus on the Sundarban. So the whole idea for this project is across the 3 river basins and deltas is to co-curate flood management. So initially we started with curation. The key objective in this project is to curate flood memories. Because the idea is to convey flood memories. So how do we convey flood memories? To convey flood memories, you can write, pieces, and there could be also literature, fiction, non-fictional scholarship to really talk about the floods and all the different kinds of encounters and experiences from a particular region. And which could be the narratives could be historical content, the narratives could be place-based. That's fine. So the idea is to convey, flood stories and flood memories. How people, think about floods. How do they, so memory is a different ballgame altogether. And I have to also confess that memory studies is not my domain, and as such, Fatima, I'm learning a few things as I'm doing this project with all the other stakeholders and most importantly the communities. Now, so the idea was to convey flood memory. And then how do we convey flood memory? So we started thinking of more radical and active methods through which this communication would take place. And then curation became a very important methodology. And now we are really focusing on co-curation. So these are the very important questions that we ask, that what should be curated? Because we want to convey the flood narratives. We want to try to make people aware, to make we try to paint the picture that is embedded in flood memories, in this case for Sundarbans. So then the question that we ask in terms of co-curating the whole thing is that what should be curated? Who should curate? How? For whom? With what purpose? These are, I think, key questions. And so these are, like, again, bits and pieces from the exhibition that we're trying to put up, and we are really going mad because on one hand there's a pressure and challenge of curation. Because when we are entering into the domain, we cannot compromise on the quality of curation, and we cannot say that we don't know, we have not done our homework or that got the research on base principles of curatorial or co-curatorial practices. But at the same time, they're also challenging some of them. Now, so these are these are pieces from the from the design, because the exhibition will take place between 6th and 11th December at ICCR in Kolkata, and this is on sensing the Sundarbans. So where you can sense the Sundarbans through a multisensory, like this is going to be a multisensory kind of feeling, like tactile and olfactory and all those kind of things. And I'm just showing you some like designs and why I will again come to this now. So this is, so you can see. So these questions again become very important. Household campus. How can household campus be an important panel for the floods? Because if you see the literature of floods in Sundarbans, you can see a lot of tables and data and quantitative metrics on, and geography, of course, with the change in land use and land cover, which is very, very important. But at the same time, it is not an adequate, how do I say, not adequate knowledge to capture the details that kind of comprise the flood narratives. But you can see here, so these are some blank, like white spaces, like a curatorial text will be there. You see on the floor, there will be a relief, and then we will try to curate a household campus. And then I did the logic, why household campus? Then I asked this question, that what should be curated? We should curate what? Then you see, this is a panel which is like water and silt, which tries to focus on what we call fluid scale. And then there's scholarship now. There is established scholarship on hydrosocial cycle and also hydrosediment social cycle. Like what happens? What happens to the hydrosocial cycle when sediment is incorporated? So that literature is there. But then, there will be sketches and drawings from the place. I will tell you whose drawings. And then from there, so we know the theory. And then there are the sketches and the drawings. And then we try to draw inferences, empirical points from these drawings, and try to see how that inform, whether that inform or deviate from the mainstream hydrosocial sediment scholarship on them. So, and this is a space where we are trying to not be, and here the people from the field, they will be ready with their 7 products, which I also call 7 actors. And there will be a screen that there will be no sound, but some visuals with subtitle, where you see how the process through which the interaction between all the actors would be displayed, or kind of project. So step by step co-curation. How do we arrive at it? But I have only shared some examples. It's not the whole of it. Because we are still prepared. It's still the design phase. But these are the things which have been finalized, that these would be there as panels. But then the question is, how did we arrive at that? who decided that this kind of panels would be there, and how they, how we those different kinds of things. So, step by step configuration last 3 years or so. And it all started with the field school and followed by field board, because the field school also, so from last 2 years, we're actually organizing field school, winter field school in Kumimai, in that space. And it's a collaboration between Kharagpur and University of Waterloo, Canada. And our students, our research scholars, and some bureaucrats also, they join. It's open to everyone, but every year we can accommodate. We are trying to increase the numbers, but through some homestay arrangements, etc. But we can actually accommodate around 30 people in that space. And it is an immersive experience, though I do not really like the word immersive that much, because it's very much used and it's kind of buzzword now. But still, this is really immersive because they get up there in the tent, they make tea with the male and female members of the premise, and it's really very how do I say, like active involvement with the setup, with the space, with the people, with the humans, with everything. So it started with field school, or the field board, or the field school and field board simultaneously. This field board is also part of the field school. In-depth ethnography, knowledge co-production, and children's drawing competition, which we just organized 2 weeks back in Kumimari, and they are from the school. They are the school children from one primary school in that village, and from class 4 to 6 and from class 8 to 10. And these are the methods. So now, I think again in the morning there were discussions about transdisciplinarity. And transdisciplinarity is something where knowledge co-production automatically comes into the picture. Where knowledge co-creation, co-production, which means what? Which means, different stakeholders, diverse range of stakeholders, they come together. And ideally, there should not be inherent. But, of course, there is also a critique of transdisciplinarity. There is critique about knowledge co-production, where people talk about how positionalities and hierarchies, also become part of transdisciplinary co-production. But the idea is that, when we become aware of the critique, we try to avoid that. And if what we are up to, if that is extremely clear, and if there is a converging, agenda, if there is a collective converging agenda, then I think all the different, weaknesses, maybe their age starts becoming blunt. So anyway, these are now some pictures from the field board. And so these are some of the snippets. And this is the picture. Every picture, of course, they have their captions and they have their descriptions. And again, I can go on and on about each of them, because these are the narratives from the ground, from the field. And why am I focusing on this? Is not so uncommon. Why am I showing all these pictures? And will it really make sense? Because people will expect that this is disaster. But I have to show technical, quantitative data and metrics. How can a presentational disaster go on by this kind of, otherwise innocent, how do I say it? They are well loaded, but again, they cannot, maybe, they really don't fit into the mainstream discussion on disasters. But every photo here, it has a narrative. And our not final, but at least our major understanding from the Sundarbans now is that, if you read the mainstream literature of the Sundarbans, barring a few, one or two, and their literature is also very recent. But if you see the mainstream literature of Sundarbans, you'll see that the Sundarbans is completely depicted, and there are two alternative images. So one is that Sundarban, and due to both these images, Sundarban is very well discussed in the global, platforms or forums on climate change. Whether IQAC or is that it is a UNESCO heritage. It is a habitat for the Royal Bengal tiger. It is the richest biodiversity hotspot. It is an ecological hotspot. All these best things. So Sundarban has all these best feathers on her neck. On the other hand, it is extremely vulnerable to climate change. And it is facing the ground. I mean, it is facing sea level rise, and it faces frequent cyclones. And in the Anthropocene, the cyclones, their frequency, their intensity, everything is just exacerbating. Then, what is the solution? So you'll see that again, unfortunately, the solution package is coming from the global north. And this is not only for Sundarbans, but for all other vulnerable ecologies of the world. And Sundarbans, unfortunately, is also part of that. And what is the solution? The solution is an quote-unquote managed retreat or strategic retreat, which means that the people have no option, but they have to go to other places. They should be relocated. Because Sundarbans should be left to wilderness. Because Sundarban has that, and you will find plenty of literature. The economics, they have used those valuation frameworks, hedonistic valuation, contingent valuation, so many techniques to show the price of Sundarban. Mango price, the price for the other flora, so you have that data. So how can Sundarbans, which is such an important, such a lucrative commodity, ecological commodity, be left to these people? And the argument is that they are vulnerable. They are victims of climate change. So as they are victims of climate change, so they will face the crisis. So it is best for them. It is even better for Sundarbans if relocation strategies are there. And this is on. This is on. This is something where WWF is playing a big role. And there is also fight. Because very fortunately, still resistances are there. And there is a big forum. And there are people like Jalpaiguri, Mahavidyalaya, who have come together, are kind of raising their voice against this. I is also part of this initiative now. And then our argument is that, for example, this is not a this project, but another project. I'll share the details with you later. And we have a website, and this is very important because this is not an IIT project. This is a project where everyone, all of us, should come together, and because the other problems is possible to handle. So, and this project is called Engaging for Sundarbans. And so the key argument also through these photographs, for example, is that so we are trying to teach social resilience against management. Social resilience. Social resilience, and this is the feeling, this is the intrinsic feeling that I really had when for the first time I landed in Kumbh. Because my idea about Sundarbans changed. It was an eye-opening experience where I saw that these people were not mere victims of climate change, but they were continuously, adapting to change, and they were continuously, innovating and improvising several agricultural practices, techniques, and life was on. So we can have hours and hours of discussion on that, but those agricultural practices, which we call situated adaptations or situated adaptive practices, are also very much there. And we feel that these needs to be rigorously documented, communicated and disseminated to kind of demonstrate what Sundarbans is. And all these things, this was taken when Cyclone Dana alert was there in October 2024, last year. And you see here how this man and woman were a couple. They were trying to collect shrimp and crab and small fish varieties. And when we talked to them, they told us that due to rising waters, they were carried by the river on the bank. So it was an opportune moment for them to really collect that. And so they explained to us that this weather condition is otherwise very fruitful for this particular village. So when people from Kolkata, people here in Kolkata were extremely getting worried Of course, worries and anxieties should be part of this whole thing. But that was not the only reality around cycling Dana, and that is why and that is how going there, talking to the people, understanding the field dynamics becomes so very important. So just maybe 3-4 minutes. Okay, so this is, these are some images again. This is from our again recent discussions. I don't know. I will not be able to tell you whether this is an MGD or this is something else, and that is why I am sure I will never be accepted by sociologists because they cannot really mess up with methods. But really? Oh, really? He's he's one of the very leading field implementers here, and yes, this collaborating with us is a very important stakeholder in the region. And we are closely working with his organization, SPPS. So, and this is like a snippet from the drawing competition, and it's a beautiful drawing. There are so many other drawings, the more complete ones, but the incomplete ones also, they carry so much meaning with them. And we have not done it yet, but our exercise now, like draw the inferences and try to see like how we inform the hypothetical social cycle from the way that they understand water. So 2 topics were given to them. The 2 broad topics: water and seed. So in Bengali, Bangla, Ambulon Jol and Mati Chotika. That was the second one. So this is from Jol. But then it was also it's very interesting to see how, again, it is very difficult for us to make segregation between one and two. So finally, yes. So this is something again which has now become part of the initiative. So we are trying to kind of formalize this. So the villagers, the women also play a leading role in kind of producing different products. So from these are part of the agricultural activities. For example, Florida flower is grown in their homestay. So the others will buy it. But now some of them they used to kind of dry the flower and drink it as a herbal, and they know the benefits of it. And now we know in Amazon check the price of it. So then we thought, why not we just try to institutionalize this appeal? And this also gives us an opportunity to work closely with the NGO, urban producer organization, and this with direct impact on their livelihood opportunities. Food and nutritional security, and several other things. And also important. So several other activities and see how these are now getting branded and packaged completely global. So that so that they don't fall under the trap of the forex or the middlemen. So yes, so this is the space where we will be having our exhibition. We are extremely excited and enthusiastic, at the same time very, very nervous because this is not a team of curators. I have not outsourced anyone, but I am very fortunate to have Professor Pradesh Patnaik against the spending day and this exhibition now. Somehow he is extremely excited. He has not been to me yet, but and that is how he is creating a panel of his own. Apart from all his other things, he has one private panel where he is using haiku and his own paintings. And this is because he has never gone to Women due to circumstances, his left hand he planned for cancer, and now he has beautiful poems and reflections and paintings, as he has known Women from us, as he has seen Women from our lives, so something like that. So yes, so my final, maybe not an argument, but maybe some thoughts is about this particular discussion on decolonizing museum making initiatives is something that's going on, because this global warming. So there is this big forum, which is this warming water museum network, global water museum network. So global YAMU, and so which really, it is a big collective of the curators all over the world. So right now they are having their annual conference in Brazil, and because now this discussion is very important because for a long period of time, museums know. Museums have been, and how do I say, they are like they are the institution of the state. So like archive, like state archive or colonial archive. So museum making has a very strong colonial legacy. So now the whole world, the curators, the practitioners, they're trying to, and artists, definitely, they are trying to, they're trying to free museum and artifacts, thought process, everything from the classes of, this stage, late, embedded stone. My argument is that I think this is also the right time where focusing on water and maybe using some of the qualitative methods and through lot of these kind of experiments and strong collaboration with the practitioners and grassroots organizations and people, we can also actually decolonize disaster research and disaster studies. So it is a kind of feedback loop where both disaster studies and disaster research and museum making could be decolonized with narratives, with stories, with realities and complex dynamics from the field. Okay, so these are some of the happy moments from this particular island village. But yes, this is also, I think, giving a lot of inspiration and momentum to also work in other villages. But the only bad thing is that once you are there, there is no route to come back. So continuously, you will feel after a point of time that you have become a kind of NGO member who is always trying to tap funding potential and opportunities, because these initiatives, they have to really go on, and all of us through these kind of opportunities. And again, I'm sure this is not naive. There are power questions. There are, I cannot eulogize and romanticize because I know, I know the details. I know, the complexities. I know like how the space and how the different steps that we have, the steps that we do. They're not completely, how do I say? It's not billion. Yes, there is steps, but at least I think this initiative is really giving a lot of scope and opportunity where we are trying to exchange and co-create things together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dhupguri, for this wonderful presentation. And I actually learned a lot. And I guess it's looking at the PowerPoint, and I guess it's thinking. And the first impression that I had after listening to a presentation, this is how we need to do our research work these days when we are thinking of collaborating humanities and climate studies, or how we need to intervene, how we need to interact with nature. But this is a way we should think of combining our three ideas, outlooks, with geography, with our understanding of nature, our understanding of climate, and how we should manage disaster, and rather we should try to prevent disaster. I open this discussion, this paper, for interaction, suggestions, observations, questions, and we already, Bodhibanda is here. Please, sir, would you like to have the mic?
First of all, thank you, Professor Mukherjee, for this brilliant presentation and for the that you talked about. Yeah, it's a very relevant and important project, research project that you have envisioned. For two things, I think, from my experience of a bit of traveling and also working in the Sundarbans. First of all, as you know, we have been talking about Kubimari and you must know about the other islands around those places. Now, earlier we used to hear about tiger widows, that is, the widows whose husbands were taken away by tigers. But now they talk about climate widows or climate grass widows. That is, grass widow means widow whose husband is still there. That is, men are now migrating to the industrial zones of the Sundarbans, working in Kolkata, in other parts of India, in other metropolises. So the villages are being depleted. That is one side. The other side is in Kolkata. My experience is that people are so completely ignorant about this biodiversity hotspot, which is barely 80 kilometers as a crow flies. So this kind of museums are very important to sensitize people, to include people, to influence the planners and all, and my best wishes to this. I have just one or two observations I was thinking when we were talking about this. I was thinking of, I'm sure you know about Kochi Muziri's Biennale, a big art, mainly installation art. No, not in Venice. It's in Kochi. Its template is Venice, but it's held in Kochi every 2 years. This year, incidentally, it will be there. It starts around the middle of December, I think 12th December, and it continues till March. For 3 months, it's good. It's a huge thing they organize. There's a big government support. Other private companies also join in, and the entire Fort Kochi island is taken over and they do it. I was thinking of every year they showcase artists who are working on disasters, particularly climate disasters. And I remember I incidentally visit that every time. This year also I am planning to go. Shubodh Gupta, the artist who must have heard his name, he's an installation artist. Shubodh Gupta made a brilliant installation. Inside a big room, he installed a boat, a real boat, and inside the boat, he just put pots and pans and thatchworks of huts and all these kind of things. It's an artwork, but it showcases the disaster, the appropriateness, and the way the people move from one island to another using this kind of things. I also remember, I forget the name, I think it's South Korean, a photographer who did extensive photographic archive of Burapara Island, the sinking island. And what he did was, he put people, the villagers, on precarious tiny pieces of land that is submerged by water, children holding their boats, and it's a very well-known international exhibition. So my suggestion would be to include the artists also into these things, and perhaps you know that from last year, Kolkata is also having a biennale. So if you can tie up with them, or you can also approach Kochi, not this year, but maybe 2 years later. So if you can tie up with them, if you can tie up with artists, then I think they can also give their valuable inputs, and it will also highlight the thing in it. So that's it.
Thank you so much for sharing your work with us. I was just thinking, because you mentioned the drawing competition, and in most moments of crisis, I think one of the voices that most of the time they come out would be children's voices because they don't have the language to express trauma, disaster, happening in cases of children who cross over from Tibet, children in exile. So that they start the painting club. So I found it very interesting that we had a competition. But I'm just thinking, you just showed one drawing where on the keywords being shared of water and silk, they do something where there is a flood-like situation. The rest of the kids that in the picture that you show, they were painting beautiful scenery from Sundarban's. Yes. Where the other paintings too showed the wayside and how is they see.
This is my invitation because several people that from the morning I'm trying to gather pictures from here and there and trying to make the people. So and I'm very sorry for this because I'm always underprepared and always I'm on spot meetings, I'm on spot. So there are beautiful things that if you are interested, because it's for everyone, honestly. There's no for everyone. So if you are interested, I just share the link and because we really love to see them, and maybe you can also do something because this is a methodology itself. So yes, so because I remember one picture where he drew a man, a very handsome man actually from the village, and who sculpted Mahavidyalaya on the bank of a river. And then I asked him, so we also took interviews from we talked to these kids. And then when I asked him, like, what is this? So then he said that this is poli. So with the color, this, the more and just talked to like after her, we had one Dhupguri. So he kept us there very much in his mind. So and we don't understand this. When we say seal, and then we say Puni, Pada, Mati, and Sundarbans seal. So it's always about most of the times I'm negative connotation about this. Because that is very unfortunately the age-old Western colonial hydrological, framing on us. That water is best, it's going on, and the land is best when it can generate living. All the other different kinds of fluid entities, they are treacherous, they are treacherous, they are unruly, they are unhygienic, they are wild, etc. But this boy, that particular picture, which completed in 40 minutes, so that really has disrupt our community frame. So I'm very happy to share in all these cases. Thank you. You have
Yeah, just one small one. This is not even a question, just simply I just want to call you more so that you can clarify. You mentioned about decolonizing part. I want to understand these. You just elaborate on that. So one way I want to say that when we are talking about the power, I think we are different types of but is that what I was thinking to address? When you were talking about decolonizing, you were talking about how you can get out of the power of the
yes.
So as in this picture, when you are doing the routine, what kind of power neutralization we can really impose on that? Because our subject is also rigorous. The part of us, the what we want to see, the sort of things we want to come out. So how sort of neutralize that? And then to make it as a decolonizing.
So yes,
And I will add to that, so that when you are reading methodological inputs into this, so you are also trying to visit that, like whether I'm understanding it properly, trying to also destabilize the otherwise Western framework of looking at it, and bringing in one much more fair and humility and the lived social reality into focus while we are looking at this.
I think a great
Yes, and how do those questions does hang on.
No, absolutely. I think it's a big discussion.
So, sometimes we have
one statement to this, but again, it's a very big discussion, and this is again something which is part of our ongoing discussion. Honestly, I started. Of course, decolonizing decision making is the dream of Sarah. So, who is the founder of the League for the Youth? And this project is also, it was actually conceived by Sarah. So, and then she told me, I have this idea in mind, we got out, and we YouTube your Sundarmas case study.
So if it's Sundarban, I will always say yes. Because there are opportunities to involve people and make so they are all overlapping connecting things. But the only thing was that I'm not an artist at all and I don't have any background with this. So, but I'm working very closely with Sarah for the last 3 years, and you see that leaving Water Museum, I must mention that this is such a fantastic virtual platform, and now they are because when I say virtual platform, the outputs you actually see virtually. It is also interactive. But then, there are researchers, there are volunteers, there are the people who are continuously working on the ground. And also, Sarah, she really works very closely with children. And how do they participate? How do they understand what it is? And Sarah also has online model classes to the people what is doing. So, what I'm trying to say is that this is a dream. This is a dream project, and through Living Water Museum, one of the major agendas is decolonize museum making initiative. Now, again, I really don't have a very grounded understanding of this, coming from the background of history. And if I even, just rely on some of the classical, scholars, philosophies, information to an area, I think I understand that why artifacts, why objects, why museums and archives, they are extreme. Particularly, have also critiqued, historians, because historians completely dwell on the archives. Now, if we are dwelling on archives, of course, history, long-term temporal scales provide a part of temporality to the discussion, which is very important. But at the same time, what are the concepts? What are the sources from where we are extracting knowledge? So I think decolonization is the first step, and as you rightly mentioned, that I am also doing projects. I will not mention the details right now, but I'm doing project where they also say that they are decolonizing things, but they are decolonizing, and who are trying to come there and exactly try to people are saying something, and but they are trying to see their feelings, and they are noticing exactly those things that they would like to do. So, then the plot is lost. So, that thread is also very much there. But what I'm trying to argue, not argue that, so this is something now where I can really sincerely put some efforts and then to develop very much. This is something which happened over 10 years ago. And I think this is a wonderful way through which we can really think of decolonizing both museum making and also disaster research. And I have been more grip on the disaster research part of it, because at least so far as Sundarban is concerned, but overall also, but mostly so far as Sundarban is concerned, I think our empirics clearly show, not only our, when I say our, I also need to work by Ami, I also need to work by Vikram Mehta, and these people. And so where, and Jyotirindra, for example, who is Tushar Mandila. And then said the Sugar Torture by so all these people together. And so if you see and see the empirics, you see that how Western notions of disaster and how all those methods that are applied to map and measure disasters, they are just one part of the story. And unfortunately, if research just follow those frameworks and only generate that particular set of data, and all these are not discussed so much, not explored, not critically integrated, then we will end up in managed strategy kind of eco-strategies.
Thank you so much for this wonderful session. The first invited talk of the day, and like our keynote speakers, this was also something which gives us so much of food for thought. And staying and listening to this session makes me go back to my thanks to Jimia ma'am again. Makes me go back to our research scholar days back in KGP, so those memories stay flying as well. So these discussions will go on. And now it is time again to welcome another invited panel, the last panel, but a very distinguished panel for the day. And these stories can go on. Like it's already 5:10 and still we are glued over in this conference room thanks to our speakers. So let me welcome Dr. Priyank Patel, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Geography in Presidency University, Kolkata. And he specializes in fluvial geomorphology, focusing on the geomorphological analysis of the Jhelum River basin, geoinformatics and land use and cover chain studies. His teaching spans geotectonics, geomorphology and remote sensing applications, while his research has mapped erosion process, backland terrain development and river corridor health in eastern India. He has overseen funded projects, guided doctoral students, and remains committed to a very field-based geography education and multi-scale landscape analysis. And to do the moderation or moderating the session would be Professor Mukherjee again. So I know this is going to be little like taxing on your minds, but maybe we'll have a lot of discussion floor coming up once more. Thank you.
Hello.
So, good evening, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And thank you, Devoshi, thank you, Sneha, thank you, everyone, for inviting, or at least bearing to listen to this. So, this will be a bit technical, it will be a bit different from what we heard. And I'll talk about two things, and these are the things that we have been looking at for the last couple of years. And we are looking at, since we are talking about disaster and its after effects, how disasters persist. So we are talking about some sand mining. But sand mining is volunteers. You go to the river, Palikulo, Tulejao, that's it. Doesn't leave any signatures. Right? That is one thing that I will talk about. And the second thing is flood signatures. Means flood road, that's it, right? The flood is gone. But we have a look at what really happens, right? So this is what I mean by sand mining from rivers, riverbed sand mining from rivers. Devoshi mentioned I am doing a project on this as well. This is part of another word. And sand mining has become a very big issue across the world today. It is a big issue in West Bengal as well. Right? There's a lot of politics involved, there's the entire political economy that goes around it. And I will look into the physical side of it. So there are basically two types of sand mining. One where you take it from the floodplain, one where you take it from the riverbed itself. And when you take it out from the riverbed, you can either take it out from the bar, from the drier part of the channel, or you can take it up from the inner part of the channel. Now, fine, it is like one random actor, one person going there. Now you can classify it into artisanal mining, where you are doing it basically manually by hand. You can also have mechanized mining, right, which is where the interesting bit comes. So, if you can see this is the Kaveri River, and this is Tiruchirappalli. This is the Kaveri River, and the Kaveri River in Tiruchirappalli, it breaks into two strands. One is the northern part, one is the lower part. Now the lower part is the natural part, where there is no mining. But if you look into the northern part, what do you see? You see rectangles, 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 rectangles. Now no river will ever form that. Those rectangles are the blocks from where sand mining has happened. Right? So what we are seeing is, we are seeing these signatures in the landscape which were not seen ever before. Why? Because we are having these kind of mechanized, organized mining and extraction from riverbeds, and it totally changes how rivers go. Right? So one of the jobs that we have been doing as part of the projects is to document for the first time how rivers look when they are mined. Okay, how rivers look when they are mined. Why? Because as part of geography, as part of geomorphology, you study landforms that are created by rivers, you study landforms that are created by glaciers, winds, and so on. But there's an entirely different category of landforms that are created by human beings. And we call them anthropogenic landforms or anthropogeomorphic landforms. And there's a new classification of them given in 2009, 2010 by Zhao. And where, for example, you can have landforms coming out of wars. For example, the US both Vietnam created big hollows. Today, those hollows are used as rice farms. But you host the Olympics in a particular place, especially Winter Olympics, you create a ski slope, that's an artificial landform. You create your agricultural fields are artificial landforms. Because these are not something made by nature, right? So we can have a classification of them. And looking at these landforms, we try to develop some scheme for them. So we call them sand hollows, where you scoop up the sand but there is no water there. We call them sand pools, where you scoop up the sand so much that there is water there, the river water seeps in. And then sand mounds, where you pile up the sand tracks, where you have trucks going across the river, right? And you can have manual extraction of sand. And what you also see is the changes in the color of the water. Because you're mining, you're churning up the river bed, so what happens is you U-turn the river yellow. Literally U-turn the river yellow, right? So there's a lot of suspended sediment. And I'll show you what that does to the river as well. And you can see these very nicely. You can see on a Google Earth image where you have little bit hollows, where you have little bit ponds that are created on top of the sand parts, right? And we see this across rivers. You zoom into Google Earth, you zoom into almost any part of India where there is a dry river, say for southern Bengal, Jalpaiguri, Shilaburi, Ojoy, Damodar is extensively mined. So you zoom in, you will see these kind of landforms. And we call them, or Zhao calls them montanogenic landforms. That is landforms created by mining. So mining based landforms, so we call them montanogenic landforms, right? So I will show you some examples of how these change, how these evolve over time. And I'll take you to the Subhadrarekha River, part of the Subhadrarekha River, a couple of videos over there. And this is where it is. And see how this changes over time. So you go from one season to another. The mining season is typically from October onwards till the next June. So end of the monsoon till the start of the monsoon again. Because monsoon time you have cool water, so no access to the river, right? So what happens is you start off by having some roads or having some flattened parts where trucks and JCBs start to access. Then they start to create some ponds where they are scooping up. And then as the season progresses, you scoop up all the sand from in between these roads, and at the end, you just have fingers going into the river, and all the sand in between has taken place. And then if you look at the images, what you will find is there's a difference in the tone, right? That there's a difference in the color. The open river itself, that's darker, and wherever these ponds are, they are lighter color, bluish, lighter color. Why? Because that is because of the churning up of the sediments. That is because of the high turbidity that is created in those ponds itself. Now, these features are till date undocumented. You open any geography textbook, geography textbook, you will not see them. Right? And that is why we feel that it is very important to record them and try to assess them together. And this is how the features look. Sand mounds where you pile up and you can see the density there. Sand pools where the riverbed has been dug up. Right? Sand hollows and so on. Right? And it's not just there. This is part of the work Dhupguri has been doing. This is in North-Bengal. This is Mahavidyalaya River, not very far from here. These are some of our drone shots where you can see the piling up of the materials on the riverbed. That is a Mahavidyalaya River, right? And what I'll do is I'll just zoom in, so maybe you can better appreciate what's happening. So can you see the signatures as people are mining? Yeah. Okay. And then how this transpires eventually you create the ponds in between, and then once you've taken up all of the sand, you just have small fingers that are left. You just have small fingers that are left in the stream. Right, so this is what is happening to our rivers, and as yet we don't have any literature documenting that. Same thing, the same place in the Dhupguri River from 2018 onwards to 2021, how that bar has been consumed. And this, so somebody told me, so what if it is gone? There's a monsoon, there's a flood, the sediment will come back. It does not. It does not come back all the time. And there are places where we see the Mahavidyalaya, there are places where we see, I showed you the Kaveri, where even if mining has stopped, once because you hollow out the river bed, the river does not come back to equilibrium so quickly. Because once you hollow out the river bed, you create turbulence, you destabilize the channel. And so even if you stop mining, the entire area becomes like a morass. What happens is there is a flow stagnation. And then what happens is as if there is no flow at all, the river will stay. One of the best examples I can give you is the mining that happened in North-Bengal River. If you look at the stretch below it, they stopped mining, but now the area is just overgrown with ponds. Why? Because there is deeper parts of the river bed over there. And so what we have been doing over the last 2 years is creating documentation of them, mapping them, trying to give them names, looking at the patterns that have been developed. Why? Because there is no record of this. So, say something like a bird's foot, how the pattern has grown. Okay, and it's different in different parts of the country. You go to in West Bengal, because we have very wide rivers and we have very large point bars. So the access is from one single point. And there are very funny stories. I have a friend in Bordhaman, and the Dhupguri is extensively mined. And whenever these very heavy, wet, sand-laden trucks, they go along the river bank and they go along the embankments, they break the embankments because the trucks are very heavy. So the villagers had a discussion with the local sand mining group, and they were like, don't take your trucks over our territory because it affects our roads. So they told the local sand mining করছিলেন তারা জমিটা কিনে নিয়ে তারপরে তাদের রাস্তাটা পাকা রাস্তা আর অ্যাকচুয়াল মানুষের রাস্তাটা কাঁচা রাস্তা। So there is a lot of money that comes from sand mining, right? আর আমি local sand mining গ্রুপটা ভদ্রভাবে বলছি, মানে mafia is a better term. So we face a lot of problems when we do these kind of surveys, when we do these kind of we cannot go at night because night time গেলে ওখানে থেকে যেতে হবে আর কোনোদিন ফিরবো না। But day time যখন আমরা সার্ভে করি এমন হয়েছে যে আমাদের ধরে নিয়ে পুলিশ স্টেশনে গেছে যে আমাদের ছবি কেন তোলা হয়েছে, right? So there's a whole nexus that goes on very often. Anyway, so in West Bengal we have these huge point bars, so the roads and tracks they radiate up. In South India, the rivers are far more narrow, so there it's very rectangular. So different parts of the river, different parts of India, we see different kinds of landmarks that are coming up. Right? So, and we can map these tracks over time. We can see which parts of the bar is being eaten up at what time. And then what does it do to the river? This is just 1 year. So in 2022, you had these sand pools which were there on the Dhupguri. And then what happened is you basically deepen out the river. So what the river does is it goes through those pools. And so the channel, it was not near a particular bank. Now the channel is near that particular bank. So village on that bank, which was safe, now it is no longer safe because the river has come towards your bank. And because you deepened out the channel, now it is much more vigorous. It is going to start and attack the river bank and you are facing river bank erosion in that particular place. So this is some of our data for what we have seen. And what we have seen is earlier there were more sand hollows, that is people were scooping up. They were creating holes, but it was not deep enough. Still okay, and that is called part skinning. But now we are seeing that sand pools have gone up, and they have gone up by somewhere 2.5 times, somewhere 13 times. A huge number of sand pools that is making. What do we tie this to? We tie this to the growth of the real estate industry in Bengal, where there is a lot of demand for the building materials, construction materials. And river sand is very valuable because it is granular, it has the finest sphericity. So river transported sand is very valuable. So there is a lot of growth in this. So what we also did is we did a very fine scale drone survey. This is part of the water and we are seeing that there's almost a 6-meter deep hole that is being created when these JCBs are acting and they are mining the particular part. So যতটুকু ছিল আরো 6 মিটার তাকে গভীর করে কেটে দেওয়া হচ্ছে, right? So this is what we are getting. These are some of our map outputs, right? So let me just go ahead. Same thing. This is a Muiraki river. This is part of some work we are doing with the North-Eastern Hill University. So where we are seeing is that is a relative elevation model where we see exact locations. And where we are seeing is wherever the sand mining has taken place, the channel has become much more turbulent. The channel has become much more destabilized. And it is becoming more unstable. And we can get this when we use these high resolution data sets that are now available. We can really identify the mining bits. We can really identify how much drop in the riverbed has happened. For example, if you see here, this was the riverbed, and we have the mining bit over here. And so, by how much depth there is, you can find out the volume that has been taken out, and we are able to calculate those things, right? So another example I'll show you, this is Jalpaiguri. Jalpaiguri is quite famous because people go to a place called Gour, and Gour is, it has beautiful sandbars. At one point of time, it has beautiful sandbars. You should go and play football on those sandbars. But today you won't find anything because 2017 onwards, there was extensive sand mining in the river, and I'll show you that. So these are the sand mining that happened and how those extents increased. Yeah, so this is 2003 and then 2016. The yellow bits are the sandbars, but the red bits are not the bars that are written up. Right? So the red bits are the bars that are written up, and that has now. So 2016, 2018, nothing. But now we have something interesting, which we have not seen anywhere else. What we now have is 2024. So post-COVID, they stopped the sand mining in this river. Why? Because there was a lot of global friction with the agriculture community versus mining community. There was a lot of friction. So once they stopped sand mining, the bar came back. So we do have a situation where if you don't interfere with the river for a period of time, you get the bar back, right? And that is something which we are now looking at. How long does a bar take to recover? Because that becomes important geologically. Why? Because if you want the river to recover, so you mine for a period, then you stop it for a period, let the bar come back, again you mine, again you let it stop. So can we have a cycle that follows accordingly, right? And these are our data for throughout the southern Bengal, different rivers from Ojoy all the way down to Mongshokni. What is the mining status? And then what this mining does, it leaves behind some legacy things. Now you may think that, why am I talking about this in a seminar that is disaster? I consider this a disaster. I consider this it's an environmental disaster. Not only that, it's a socio-environmental disaster. Why? Because a lot of people our communities are affected by this sand mining. So anyhow, what this mining does is, you take away all the fine sands from the river bed. It inverses the sediment distribution, because suddenly you go to the river bed and we are expected to find fine sands, we see coarse grains, because all the sand has been taken, right? So the riverbed now gets armored by these coarse materials, and this is what we see in the water data. The other thing that remote sensing allows us to do wonderfully is to look at water quality indexes, or it allows us to look at turbidity. So we have field data sets, we have field measure data sets of the turbidity and collateral data. And then what we can also do using Google Earth engine is we can look at how the water quality, the turbidity changes. So see, this is January. You can see the sand pools that are there, which have been mined. And then you can see as the season progresses, February, you can see these fingers are the sand cracks, and in between the mining is taking place. Right? So this is April. So this is the end of the mining season, May and June. Right? So we have these signatures very nicely from November till November to June or April, when these pools become more and more turbid, and they are very clearly identifiable with satellite images. And these pools, then what happens is, these pools, you hollow them up, some water gets trapped in them, they become disconnected from the river. In summertime, they dry out, and all the fish that have migrated into those pools, they die. Why? Because they no longer have an escape connection with the river. So those fish, they happen to die out. That's what we are seeing here. Right? So these are some of our maps, and we get very high turbidity. We get turbidity as high as 1000 FMU, 300, 400 FMU, and we don't expect life to survive in those conditions. Accordingly, our kilo values, our dissolved oxygen values are very much lower. And so we have mapped this across mining seasons for these different rivers, which states are affected the most. January is the biggest, or January is the most extravagant mining part of the year. Why? Because temperature will come right there and then you can mine most. In April, May, the temperatures are too high, so not everybody goes and indulges in the mining. Right? So these are some of our water quality data sets, and we try to match our field measured water quality with the image water quality. They don't always fit very well because the conditions change very fast. For example, there is a perfectly pristine riverbed at a density gap of the entire column. Right? So I think this is what we see. What we see very clearly, however, is wherever turbidity is high, you find dissolved oxygen is low. Okay, so more turbidity, less oxygen in the water, less facility for life to function properly. Right? And we see this everywhere. The other thing that we are able to see very clearly is, so you have this extensive mining on the riverbed, but travel to the Java, basically to the Java. So that involves destruction of the riparian vegetation, that involves multiple access points to the river. So you strip away the vegetation alongside because bar rasta the access routes and that's why wherever there are mining areas, the vegetation along the river corridor, or the vegetation on the two sides of the river, that is low. Right? So we are able to map that from the satellite images that is there. Right? So these are some of the results from the sand mining. If you give me 5 minutes more, I'll yeah. Okay. Right. So that is the first part of the talk where we looked at sand mining. And sand mining, there is a lot being written on it, but still it's not considered quote unquote as a disaster. But you look at, say you had floods in Punjab, the minister blamed sand mining. Why? Because he said that the mining in the river or gravel mining in the river destabilized the channels, so that created a lot of river banking. Now, maybe he's looking for a convenient group to blame, but it's not totally wrong. Right? So we see the same things over here. Or in fact, one news agency contacted me for did sand mining cause floods. So that doesn't happen. But what it does is, if you have a flood in a channel that has been extensively mined, then you don't know how the channel is going to behave. Because already you have followed out parts of the channel, and that is going to create a problem. Anyhow, so the other thing that I talk about, Bonna the doll Bodeka, Bonna doll Nemeka, how we follow vehicle. But that is again not really what happens, and we'll go to Jhargram again. We'll take one particular flood event. This happened when I was doing my PhD, so I remember it very well. This was in 2007. In September 2007, suddenly there was a huge flash flood in the Bloom River, which goes into the water river. And I'll show you the images of it. We took this is the inundation that happened. And I'll show you some of the images from it. So if you look at these spots, okay, suddenly you see a lot of white signatures, and that white signature means that Bali Valley is changing. Right? There's a flood and there's a lot of sand spray that has happened from the river. This is what we saw. Right? So this is the part of floods that people miss. People relate floods equal to water. They also think that floods means a lot of overbank sediment transfer. And as long as that sediment or that sand stays on the agricultural fields, nothing else happens to those agricultural fields. The farmer has already lost the crop. They are not able to grow the next crop because the sand is blanketing the field. Right? So that is something which we often overlook. This is 2007. These are some of the photographs that were taken right at that point of time in 2007. You can see homes and a lot of fields being covered by sand. Now, interestingly, what happened is one of my students worked on this. This is the same place in 2018. The sand is still there. So one single event can have a long outreach, okay, or one single disaster can have a long aftermath, okay, because it continues to persist in the landscape. And this is 2007, and you can see that the sand is still there. If you look at, and only in 2014, you can see the signatures that are there around the red dot, the lighter tones. And only in 2014 do you see some segments of green coming back, right? So at least 7 years, one single flood event will stay for 7 years in the landscape, right? And what we did is we mapped those areas where the sand spray had occurred, and we delimited. We also found out which villages were the most affected, right? So this was pretty simple. And then, say, just trying something, we have a toy river where we kind of make a small meander and we see that along which part of the meander is the breakout likely to happen the highest. So is it going to be the upper part of the bend, the lower part of the bend? Okay, so this is basically a box where we put some plastic sediment and we run some water through. And so you can see the channel that is shifting. You can see the alternate channel coming out, the channel shifting out. So on the basis of that, we try to create some 3D models. This is we just take photographs and then we merge the photographs and we make it into 3D. So how the meander widens and how the water breaks out and comes out. And on the basis of these are some of our measurements. And on the basis of that, we try to we get some ideas where the breaking is likely to happen. Then we also do some flood simulations. We use grass and we have discharge data. So we do some flood simulations. Therefore, each and every high discharge condition, how much flood area is going to be covered, and obviously 2007 and others gave us very high discharge conditions. And so through that, we try to predict possible sites where such flood breakouts may happen and display sites may happen. Right. So coming to the last part, so floods, Jharkhand में होते पड़े नाम होते पड़े उन जगह होते पड़े नाम होते पड़े क्योंकि पश्चिम में একটা জায়গায় কোন নাম ভাটা মানে পৃথিবীর চার কোন নাম ভাটালে হয়তো আর আসামে কোন নাম ওটা গায়ানাজারে কোন নাম এই তিনটে জায়গাতে কোন নাম তো anyhow so যদি এই জায়গাটা ডুবে যায় so one of the things that flood there is a misadaptation to floods in Bhata. People are not really worried by floods in Bhata because they have adapted to it. Their beaches are on the upper floor, their washrooms are on the upper floor, homes are built on stilts, and every house almost has a boat, so people are used to the landscape. But what we do find is that this data sets that we now get shows new areas where floods are happening. This is 40 years of data showing where there is new seasonal things, where new patches are being inundated. So that's a worrying thing. So light green color, light green patches come up, that means more and more new patches are being covered by floods. This data set that we get for the last 40 years to see where this is happening. So one of the impacts of floods that happen in these areas, however, is riverbank erosion, and that is a problem. Floods may not be that much of an issue, but because I personally think floods are good. Floods regenerate the landscape. They give a lot of strength. Floods are only bad if you go and live where you are not living. You are not supposed to live, right? But riverbank erosion is an issue. So this is something we did with the local disaster management office in Bhata. Yes. So can we use vegetation to protect riverbanks better, right? Can we involve communities? Can we use vegetation to protect riverbanks better? And this was used. This was done using what we call vertical grass. Husk. You get a lot of products with husk, also perfumes and soaps. And in older days, they would make pardas also with husk because very two-layer would blow in and it would fill up the room nicely. So they planted vertical grass. They planted grass and then this is once the grass grows, this is what makes the buffers. This is what we call a right-hand buffer. And the whole idea is that you make the bank very rough. So the vegetation that is standing along the river bank, you make it very rough. So when the water flows, it gets more resistance. And so it reduces the velocity of the water. So you do not allow the river to become as elusive and as it would otherwise be. It's very simple. And because this is grass, it's completely environmental friendly. It's completely low cost, right? And you're not harming anything. So this type of grass it's very big growing, so it grows very fast. And we did some soil tests also to see does it really bind the soil, how much does it do. There's an interesting story behind this because when we talked with the local BDO, he was like, I heard that this works. So I did it, I had some extra money and I saw it work. And then the BDO next to him said, I saw him and it worked in this way, so I also did it. But we don't know why. So can you help us with that? So we did the soil test and we saw that the roots really bind up the grass and it does function. And we, but yeah, of course, there are some caveats. It's not good. So you need to plant the grass, but you need to also protect the grass part, right? And that is something that needs to be done. And so we did some mapping of the river bank, and I'll show you some very stark photographs. So same river, two sides. This is where the grass was, one side, because that's where the village is, and the other side is where the grass was not there. So when the flood came, this side is gone. You can see that it's entirely yellow, so everything has been washed out. And this side is nicely protected. In fact, this is the outside that was supposed to be affected because this is the outside bed of the meander, and outside meander beds are the ones that are affected. But that got protected, and the inside bed, which is where nothing is supposed to happen, that got washed out. And you can see slumping and other signatures over there. Right? So we did our measurements, we did our modeling, and we hypothesized that if you create a grass buffer like this along the entire river stretch, we find that water velocity can drop around 0.5 to 0.8 meter per second. Water velocity can drop, which is pretty big. You can reduce the erosive power. And so is it friendly on the pocket? Yes. Because say for a 500 meter stretch, and these are government figures, these are not our figures. These are block development officer figures. So if you want to create a grass buffer, you need to set up a nursery. A nursery will cost you around 2.5 lakh rupees, right? But it's a one-time cost. And then again, if you want to create, say, for a 500 meter or 600 meter length of the river bank, it will cost you around 8 lakhs. These are figures of 2017. So let me say it has gone up. But for the same length of embankment, if you want to create with cement, that's going to cost you 1.5 crores. So you're getting the same thing at almost 1/10 of the cost or 1/20th of the cost. Right? And that is what we try to advocate that, okay, you want your cement embankments, you want your other embankments, make those, but at least cover them with grass, so that their lifespan becomes longer. Okay, so that is something which we try to advocate. And this is the framework that we found out happens with the government of West Bengal, where the panchayat proposes that we want to plant this grass buffer. Then everything depends on the budget amount. If the budget is quite less, then the panchayat does it. If the budget is higher, then it goes to the block office or it goes to the higher office, it comes back. So by the time it comes back, so the panchayat proposes this in October, the grass should be in the ground by November. So you give it 6 months to grow, then only it can protect, right? But by the time the file moves and the tender goes out and the grass is good, that is May. So June, July, March, घास बहुत टाइम होगा, ताकि धुए जाए, ताकि लोग घास बने. Okay, so that is what we try to tell people that you do it quick. If you have to do it, you do it quick. You put it into the ground in November, give it 6 months, then see what it does. Okay, so then it would work. And the entire labor for this scheme would come from the Manrega scheme. So already 100 days mandated labor. So already you have a workforce, you are paying them, you pay them to work on this. Right? And based on the graphs, you can have, there is a lot of the shoots and the roots can be used for handicraft products, can be used for perfumes. So you have a lot of women-led self-help groups that are there, you can use these things. And the NGOs that we work with, or the two companies, they actually encourage this. So this really becomes community involvement if it is done properly, where you meet a disaster and actually make money out of a disaster by protecting your lands. Right? So this is something that we found was pretty interesting. Of course, you have to also use the right variety of the grass. মানে দুটো variety হয় maybe North Indian, South Indian. North Indian টা perfume জন্য ভালো, South Indian টা মাটিটাকে লাগে। North Indian এর দামটা কম। তো টেন্ডার গুলো North Indian টা লাগিয়ে একটু কাজ করলো। Alright, so those are things that we pointed out, and you can download this app, IBGP app, International Vertical Grass Technology app. The sites that we mentioned, they got recorded on that app as part of the global network. The sites that we worked on, that in India also this was there. Interestingly, this vertical grass technology, so the people who originally developed this was the World Bank in the 1980s. And thankfully we could reach out to a couple of them who were still there, and we wrote to them, and they shared some interesting stories with us. They said that this was first tried out in India because they saw this working in other parts of the world. And it worked very well in India to stop soil erosion from hill slopes and other places. But then what questions got raised in the Indian parliament? That who are these people? Why are they coming? Why? Because you also have a cement lobby. You also have a construction lobby. So अगर हाथ से हो जाता है तो cement नहीं होगा. Okay, so there became a lot of see, disaster is big business, right? And so they actually they said that we were denied access to the sites that we were asked to be because we could not work on it anymore. Anyway, so this is what I wanted to say. Thank you so much for your patience.
Priyanka, for this very nice presentation, and I am also aware of the award, and I know how you keep looking involved with team of students and experts, and there is also a how do I say, like social side of the story. So there is scholarship now on social life of sediments, and I'm also I think keener to know from you or maybe your students social life of sand. And like the second part of it, because the first part is more technical, and when I see that how it shows the movement of the river, the braided channels, and the impact of sand mining on the rivers, the river system, and their ramified repercussions, I'm sure. So I think that, and what you mentioned that this is the first time, this kind of a rigorous documentation is going on because we don't have data on this. And I think you also know Siddharth well, and it's very organization and how they are, I think that also trying to come up with an archive, so very useful. So, and the last part of this, the vetiver grass and community involvement and different challenges that we also face because it is also not something very smooth. And the way you also try to experience the whole thing. I think it's a very comprehensive way of doing the research, which is also beneficial down the line, not only academically, but also it has a lot of practical benefits in the local region. Just one question that I have, and then I think we can take up questions. So, how scalable are these findings?
So, if you have findings in terms of, say, first part, timeline, or you have done mapping for doing this. You have the data. We have done mapping for Bolivia. It's a bad task because it's spending hours and hours sitting on the screen and just digitizing. So my students would like me for it. But then now we do have a data set at least which are the bigger spots. And reviewers are holding up the publications, otherwise we could show that. But more such projects I think are required. That's one. We also need to create, there is now awareness every other day or every week or so you will find some article on sand mining coming up. So now this is in focus, but many other people are talking based on the DSR reports, which the district survey reports that are there, which are going to be there for each district, and Siddharth and India Sand Watch, scholar people, they have rightly pointed out what are the loopholes that are there in the DSR. I think Siddharth has a presentation. So you could have talked about all this. So I think India, if you are interested in India Sand Watch Verizon Foundation, that's a very nice portal to go and look at all these data sets. And we'll also supply what we have. So we are trying to get that data together and then maybe see what we can do with it. Regarding the second part, that is the sand hills, and those are more episodic. Those are I would not say very scalable, but whatever I think is very scalable. I think that is something that can be implemented. I think Government of West Bengal has already done it in a number of sites along West Bengal. There may be planned for more sites. The NGOs that we work with, they have implemented this in parts of northeastern India or other parts. So it all depends on the funding. It also depends on scalability. It also depends on the belief. Because if you have to get people to adopt something, you have to get them to believe in it also. So somewhere we have that lack of communication, because when we talk to the villagers in these areas, we ask them, "Aapni ki jane eta ki aarki hote pare, amno ki benefit hote pare." Na, amra to shudhu jani eta lagano joni accident e kaje taka pawa. So সেখানে কি হয়েছে যে পঞ্চায়েত পুরোটা এক্সপ্লেন করে, যে তুমি এটা লাগিয়ে দাও, তুমি এটা বীজটা দেবে, তুমি এটা পরিষ্কার রাখবে, ব্যাস। If beyond, so that is where maybe we need more scientists working with panchayats or vice versa, and I think that can be scalable. It does not need to be vertical grass everywhere. There are different kinds of grasses. For example, mangroves work fine. There are, for example, I'll just share one story. In Myanmar, they are using drones to plant mangroves. 10,000 per day they are planting. So we can adopt what is locally feasible. But I think vegetation does work better than concrete structures. People have more faith in concrete structures. So even if you put them at least with education, you create an additional buffer so that you make the concrete structures last longer. You are not spending every year on it.
Thank you, Vinay. May request you to, the floor is open for questions.
If you look at sand mining from within the river, তাহলে মানে নদীর বেড থেকে খুলছে তাহলে গঙ্গা যমুনা এখানে তো আছেই, মানে গঙ্গাতে ভেরি লং হিস্ট্রি অফ স্যান্ড মাইনিং আছে। কিন্তু এই রিভার বারগুলোর উপর থেকে যদি দেখি বেঙ্গল, তামিলনাড়ু, and even Narmada and so on, these four areas are hotspots. And বেঙ্গলে এটা অনেক, মানে আমরা অনেকটা পাচ্ছি, কারণ শহরও বাড়ছে, population density higher, building material higher, real estate is one of the few industries we have. That's it. South extends is fine, but they have been quicker to adopt the policies changes. For example, Kerala has a sand budget framework, and they have not today, they have had it pre-COVID. So our sand mining rules keep on changing because sand is now considered a minor mineral, so it can be auction of sand blocks. So then rules keep getting tweaked, rules keep getting changed. So we need to come to some comprehensive idea about it. And again, it's very difficult for a state like ours for a reason. Say North-Bengal here, you have gravel along with sand. So you treat it in the same way or you treat it different. Because gravel mining is going to do different things to the river, whereas sand mining is going to do different things. The signatures are different. But going to construction material, there are the same policy and another policy. And that's why the projects that we are working on, demonstration and myself, we hope to give some insights.
Sand mining, we are giving materials back to environment, not today.
হ্যাঁ, সেটা বলা আছে। ফর এক্সাম্পল, যেমন খুব ক্লিয়ার গাইডলাইন আছে, স্যান্ড মাইনিং এর খুব বেশি কাজ হয়েছে সাউথ ইস্ট এশিয়াতে বিকম নদীর উপরে। Some of the first studies are from the BCom, by scientists from the UK, US, and all. They have worked also in Malaysia. So there they have very clear guidelines. যে আপনি ধরুন একটা নদীতে একটা চড়া আছে, আপনি চড়া থেকে মাইনিং যদি করেন, চড়ার ওপর থেকে আপনি মাইনিং করুন, 1 মিটার 1.5 মিটার ডেপথ অবধি করুন, তার তলায় যাবেন। নদীর পাড় থেকে 10 মিটার ছেড়ে দিন, নদীর পাড় থেকে 10 মিটার আর ওপেন চ্যানেলের পাড় থেকে 10 মিটার, তারপরে বাড়ির মাঝে যে অংশটা সেইটুকুনি, তাহলে দুদিকে বাফার থাকছে, আপনি মাঝখান থেকে একটু বাড়ি ফেলে দিচ্ছেন। So there are already guidelines that are there, you have to follow them, and then enforcing them is a completely different thing. Again, যদি আমি দেখছি যে the river is depositing 20 tons of sand every year in a certain place, I am taking out 5 tons, 6 tons. Fine. What's the problem? If I do it in this measured manner, actually, at that time, 5 tons of the problem. Actually, distributed model won't be a problem. Some scientists, for example, from IIT Kanpur and all, they're actually advocating sand mining in the Himalayan belt. Why they are saying that due to an increase in monsoon, due to deforestation, you are having far more sediments come down from the Himalayas. So you are actually choking up the river bed. So you actually mine it up, use it for the economy, let the river flows. So it's again science-specific. That's the problem. What will work in the Mahananda will not work in the Mahananda. So that's what we have to be more detailed studies, more inventories.
Thank you very much. And I think close for the day.
Thank you very much, all the dignitaries and participants for being a part of this particular journey. We started this day, I think it was 10:30 a.m. Really, it was a kind of energy-sapping one. Now, the last part we are going to do, we have two presenters, two dignitaries, those who have delivered lectures in this particular last session. Dr. Jenia Mukherjee from IIT Kharagpur and Dr. P.R. Praveen Patel, Department of Geography, Presidency University. I would like to request our Honorable Principal Sir, Dr. Vijay Devna, kindly stay forward, sir. And we are going to present a kind of small memento or a kind of token of appreciation. First to Dr. Jinia Mukherjee. Ma'am, kindly come over the dais. We are presenting the memento to our esteemed dignitary from IIT KGP, Kharagpur, India, Dr. Jinia Mukherjee. Kindly give her a round of applause. And next, I would like to request Dr. P.R. Praveen Patel from Presidency University to kindly receive the memento from our principal, sir. Kindly give him a round of applause. With this, I think we are going to wrap up this particular section of this last session of this day, and hope to meet all of you in the next sessions that will begin from tomorrow. I would like to request all the participants to kindly join with us right at 10:30 a.m. tomorrow. Yeah. The session will start from 11 o'clock, but I would like to request all of you kindly come half an hour before. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.